Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you are, my friends. My name's Alex, and I'm here for part 5 of the Firebase video. I super apologize for how long it's taken me to do this. In the end of November, I lost over 2 terabytes of data due to a hard drive failure, and unfortunately wasn't able to recover most of it. So, without further ado,
Let's do this one last time.
All right, so we're actually going to be starting our project back into Firebase. So go ahead and log into Firebase, pause this video, do that, and then let's return. So we're going to start a new collection. We're going to call it Leaderboard. Hit next. And this time, we're going to be assigning an auto ID. This will be relevant here in the Firebase rules in just a moment. So you need to make sure you hit auto ID. It's going to create this random string of numbers and letters, and this is to represent a UUID, some sort of ID that we'll be now using instead of a username to define players. This will be adding in a level of security to our program. So we're going to hit save. We're going to go to our rules, and you're going to notice that my rules are a little bit different than yours. I've done a little bit of adjustments, and I've added these comments here to let you know what's going on, but just to review it, after we match our database, we now look for any collection, and in this case, we're looking for a leaderboard collection, so it's just scanning through any collection that's in our data, and then it's looking for that document ID. Now, that document ID is the auto ID that we created. So here's how this works. We allow everyone to read our program, and then we allow write access only if the user is authenticated, meaning that they've been logged in, and their user ID matches the document ID. So we allow writing if the request authorization is not nothing, and the request authorized.uid is equal to the document ID, meaning users can only change their data and not any other player's data. Once you've pasted this in to your project, you'll see a little notification that looks like update or publish. So you'll want to click that, and it can take a couple of minutes to go into effect. So while we're waiting for that to happen, we're going to go to our build menu, go to authentication, and now we're going to be adding our authentication means. We're going to go into our sign-in methods, and you'll see add provider. You won't have anything here, so you'll add provider, and then here you can add or remove providers. So I've already added the anonymous provider, but if you wanted to, you could authenticate users with an email and password, the Google account, GitHub, and, well, a whole variety of other things. So I'm only going to be focusing on the anonymous. So let's close out of that. Now that we've set that up, we can just go to our canvas. That's back into GDevelop. So now we're going to navigate over to the events. All these events should be the same as the last episode. You might see a couple things reorganized just for readability for you. Otherwise, it should be exactly the same. I've commented out from list and for each name ID, and we're just going to be using the modulated design. So before we get too far along here, there's 2 things we need to do. We're going to be going to our project manager, go to our global variables, and inside of our global variable, we're going to be passing through player UUID. And this is going to represent that player document ID that we were using. We're going to switch over to text, delete the 0, and hit apply. At the beginning of our game scene, we're going to want to copy and paste this, and we're going to be deleting our score as well from the local environment. You may want to run this once just to make sure everything's cleared out. We're going to disable this for now. We're going to go ahead and create a new event group. This will be the event group for our authorization. We're going to type assign UUID/login. So because we're not using an advanced login system, we can do some very basic calls. We can call the beginning of our game scene. And at the beginning of our game scene, the first thing we're going to do is go to our actions, other actions, Firebase, authentication, and then sign in as an anonymous guest. We're still going to be passing the data, okay or error, to the Firebase connected. And then we need to assign that global player variable that we set before. So we can type variable, change a variable. We're going to go down to player UUID and hit OK. And then we're going to assign the Firebase : get user UID. And what that's going to be doing is getting that document ID that we created and assigning it into the player's global variables. Now that we're done with that, we can scroll down here. Where we save our profile, we're going to also save the UUID. So what we need to type is the Firebase code again. And then we're going to use our arrow keys or retype it if you want, or copy paste and get the user ID. And then we're going to be saving that into UUID for the profile. This isn't really necessary, but this just helps us keep track of this. So right underneath this, we're going to be needing to do a couple of changes. We're going to go ahead and copy the player UUID. So just in case something happened and we didn't get that UUID, we're going to put it up first. Make sure we capture it. Then we're going to get our player username and set our profile to it. And we're going to duplicate our profile username and get profile UUID. We're going to set that UUID to the player global just for keeping track of it for now. I'm going to go ahead and move that up just so it's nice and organized. And then we can collapse our button states. We no longer will need those. Technically, we're not going to be using a fetched username anymore. We're not going to be pulling it from the database. So instead, we'll delete that. We're going to change the username and profile, and we're going to be assigning it back to the profile username. We're going to copy and paste it. We're going to do it for all three of them. So we're going to do UUID into the profile UUID, and one more for score. Score, profile, score. And that just means if we load our document and this information is available, because it should be, let's go ahead and propagate our local variables, or in this case, scene variables. Now that that's all squared away, we can collapse that down. When we go into our profile writing, what we need to do, instead of writing it to what used to be the player's username, we're going to be checking that global variable called player UUID. And we're still going to be passing that into the collection. Because we don't actually want our UUID to be written to the profile online, because then all users would be able to see it, we're going to be deleting that document. Technically, you wouldn't have to include this in the profile at all, but I think it's kind of nice for debugging purposes, so that's why I did it this way. We're going to go into Other Actions, Firebase, Cloud, Fields, delete a field of a document. The collection is Leaderboard, or whatever you named your collection. The document is now going to be player UUID, and the file to delete is UUID. We're not going to call that back or send any errors. So now once it's written, we're immediately going to be deleting that one field out of it. That's all we need for saving. We're going to scroll down here, and we're going to be adjusting our username check here. When we're looking at the username check, we need to ensure that we change username input to now be the user UUID. However, we can't use the global. We need to use the profile dot UUID. And the reason is, if we use the global, it won't actually be able to reach Firebase. We need to make sure that we're sending the scene variable to the Firebase. And that's why we delete the UUID later on when we upload it. We cannot use the global variable. It's important to know. Since we've made the changes now to the profile UUID, we're kind of losing out on some of the things we created earlier, like name exists, and we still want the Firebase connected though. The name exists pass into the loop logic, which allows us to check whether a username is currently existing in the system. Honestly, we can just go ahead and disable that. Collapse that one down. And then we only have a few more changes to make. Really, it's just organization, but I'd like to change leaderboard here. So we're not querying something called leaderboard for a leaderboard. Instead, we're going to use the same title that we did previously in the Firebase rules for document. And we're going to do document with a capital I and then a lowercase d. I'm going to copy that. And then we're just going to paste that into these 4 spots. And now, as simple as that, we should be able to preview. I realized I made an error. We need to go into our game scene and make sure that we create that profile UUID. And this will just be UUID. And as soon as we click off, it's going to move down in alphabetical, change it to text, delete that, and press apply. And if suddenly your username stopped loading, it's probably because GDevelop has a weird thing with Firebase where sometimes you have to close out of it and restart. So give me just a second to do that, and I'll be right back. Make sure you save your game before you do. All right, I'm reloaded. I can press preview. And now we see that our username database has been cleared. Now I can type I am Alex, press enter, hit S to save. There are no errors. We can come back here and see that this has been updated with my user profile ID and only my username and only my score. So now if I went back to my game, closed it down, went back into GDevelop here, cleared out our local database. I'm going to go ahead and collapse everything down for organization. I'm going to run the preview. We can see that I am Alex is still there, even though we deleted the local stuff. Now we're going to type, I will type Alex I am, hit enter, press S to save it. Go ahead and close that down. We're going to disable this just so that we don't accidentally delete it again. Go back to our Firebase, and we can see that it updated the username. If we remove the UUID block from inside of saving our profile, I'm just going to create another child and block it out. When I press S, we have an error because it's trying to send the UUID, which is currently empty because of how we cleared the database. So what we would need to do is clear this out by opening that, typing Alex, pressing enter, hitting S, and having it overwrite it. But now what we should see is our UUID is tied in here. The reason why we don't want this to be passed through once it gets into the database is then every user would be able to check what user's UID it is and potentially dupe their accounts. We don't want the local UID being loaded in, and so this is kind of a private feature. So we're going to close our game down and make sure that we re-bring that in. Run our game. Alex I am. Hit enter. Hit S to save. Revalidate that it's removed it. And there it is. So hopefully this helped you out. If you're interested in learning more about Firebase and the way that you can use it in GDevelop, let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, I'm fairly done with Firebase, and I don't plan on covering more content unless requested. Anyways, until next time, remember, happy game making, and I'll see you in the next video.